Spontaneous speaking video 73. Alright, what's up everyone? So today I am going to be talking about how I would like to think that I've developed my TI. The reason why I say I'd like to think so is because, I know there's so many other opinions and I don't want to seem off as like I'm coming off as like arrogant or prideful or, I've got it all figured out and I'm done developing my TI or in any way, shape, or form. Because you have to put out those types of disclaimers nowadays when you think about the way that people tend to attack us nowadays. In short, I said this a few years ago, maybe even last summer actually, where I started really focusing on developing my TI in various ways. And when I posted about my process, then I had a few people like attack me like, "Oh, your TI is trash," and I don't know, like Anyway, since then, I'd like to think that I've developed it, I've grown it a lot more, and I wanted to share this, especially. So I already wanted to share this because I made a video on developing NI with David. But so I wanted to make another video on how I developed my TI when I felt like it was at a point where I could, speak enough on it. But I especially wanted to make this video after DaveSuperPowers put out his video on developing TI as an EJ, EFJ. So ESFJs and ENFJs because they have it as their inferior function. And then Meghan Levota, another ENFJ on YouTube, she posted her experience, and mine is different, but it was interesting to listen to her experience because one thing that I believe about all of the functions is that they each have different faces to them. Now I'm still trying to decipher a good amount of how many different faces each function has, but let's just say SE for example. SE is not only the face, like one face of SE is being like in tune with your body, like being able to move it in certain ways. But then another face of SE is heightened senses, Another sense also is jumping into action, and another phase is seeing things empirically for what they are. So there's different. It's kind of like different bullet points for each function. NI is not only just looking at symbolism, but it's also foresight, like future pacing and everything. And then it's also synthesizing, like being able to grab a whole bunch of seemingly contradicting perspectives and then finding a common balance between it, like some type of epiphany or answer with that. And these are just rough examples, but it's kind of like bullet points for each one. So that being said, I had seen TI. I used to get my TI and my NI often mixed up. And thankfully, when I went to the profiler training event with Personality Hacker, turns out I was not the only one. And so it's like I understand the difference, the distinction between them now, but not enough to where I can teach it to you guys. So maybe I'll make that its own video. But what I will say is that TI has its own faces. And I've been learning more and more on how those faces look like. And I have a few examples of, what I believe TI may look like and stuff like that. Like the bullet points that I've placed for TI and how that looks like for me. Okay, so the faces of TI. TI is pretty much getting away from societal expectations and norms to see what makes sense to you. Staying true to your truth, what works for me, particular way of doing things. And then the bullet points that I have for that are the faces are inductive reasoning, distance from social norms, expertise, BS detector, clean data, cognitive dissonance, dissecting, detachment, desire to be programmed well, what makes sense to you, distinctions, perfecting programming, either perfection of a jump shot or actual coding, depending on NTP or STP, because they use TI the strongest. Data uncertainty, but strides regardless. Information is not actionable. They just collect. TI just collects data. It's not usually like, oh, we're gonna make an action with this data. That's usually TE. Open to feedback and criticism. Test iterates. Willing to vet truths. Enjoys sharing truths / teaching. Systems thinking. Every node has its own system. And articulation of thought. Watching what I want without considering others may want to watch. So that's like one of the things that I also just tagged on there. So yeah, these are some of the faces of TI. And once again, like I said, watching DaveSuperPowers and Meghan Levota's video on TI and everything helped me to see TI in like a different manner, because up till those videos, I had been developing or working on my TI by, first of all, it was a subconscious thing, because my original plan was to I always just focus on NI. I personally don't believe, not that I don't believe in the 8-function model, I believe that there might be use to it, but everybody has their own different styles of stuff, and I'm not knocking those who do believe in the 8-function model, but for me, I personally don't believe in using the 8-function model in that way. I kind of go with the direction that Personality Hacker kind of like takes it as well, where I just focus on developing my auxiliary function. And I'm going to make a whole video on that titled like why I don't use the 8-function model, or why I don't believe in developing all 8 of my functions, because I know there's like people out there who they try to develop their shadow functions and stuff like that, and I think that's personally I think that I guess this is my TI. I think it's pretty dumb. And once again, that's not to offend them, but that's just, to me, that my way of making sense of that. It's like, that would be dumb for me to try and do. And for your comments on that, just wait until my video where I explain that in depth. But that being said, I focused on my NI so heavily that as that my NI was growing, I often say that once you're focusing on your auxiliary, then your inferior gets the scraps of food to grow from that as well. So it's almost like you're feeding a child at the dinner table, and then the more you're feeding the child, then the more food is going to fall to the floor, and then the inferior / dog will come and eat that food, and then it's getting fed too. So I spent so much time developing my NI that I started getting comments from, well, I only got 2 on here, but hey, 2 is good because they're both TI dominant, an INTP and an ISTP. They both commented on how good my TI is, and I was like, oh, really? Because this was at a time where I wasn't working on my TI at all. I was just working on my NI. But they'd watch some of my regular videos of me just sharing my philosophies on things, and like, yeah, you have really good TI for an ENFJ. I'm like, oh, well, thanks. And now I've come to realize why they may think that way, and so that's when now I started paying more attention to TI. But how I focused on it, so after focusing on my NI and then seeing it develop in that way, then I started to focus on my TI. My TI was, I focused on developing my TI by learning all of the logical fallacies. So I watched a whole bunch of videos on what the logical fallacies were. I wrote down a whole list of them. I started practicing them so that, I can detect when not only other people have flaws in their logic, but then also detect whenever I had a flaw in my own logic. And I know it's not as natural of a use, or it's not as quick as maybe a TP would be, but it was still something helpful for me to at least have, being that it was my weakest function. So that was something that I focused on a lot. I watched when I would be using red herrings, or if somebody else was using an ad hominem, then I'd watch out for that too. Oh, wait a minute, why are we using this? And all of the different fancy names for it and everything. I started focusing on that. I started learning formal logic. And that was one way that I was really trying to pick up how to use my TI in that sense as well. And then I also started learning how to pretty much absorb a lot of information and clean slice it. Now, I'm not as good, once again, as a TP would be. So throughout this whole video, just understand that disclaimer. I'm not trying to say that I'm nearly as good as someone who has TI as their auxiliary or dominant function. May not even be as good as one who has it as their tertiary function. But I do just try my best because I refuse to let it be an Achilles heel to me. Like thinking is my last function, but I don't want that to become like, oh, obvious, like, oh yeah, of course thinking is your last function. Like, no, I want to at least have that skill sharpened enough so that I could use it when I'd like to, even though I prefer to use my FE function. And, they work together, they come together. So that comes a lot with my tact. Like, I value truth-telling. I talked about how I don't like to give hollow flattery. I like to give constructive criticism. And if you ask me something, if I give you like a compliment, if I seemingly flatter you, it's truthful. Like, as in, like, that's my actual real opinion. If I don't think that you can sing, I'm not going to tell you that you can sing. So you can best believe that if I do tell you that I believe that you can sing, well, then that means I really do personally believe that you can sing, stuff like that. So I value truth-telling. Right now what I'm working on is radical honesty. And also, once again, what I picked up from Meghan Levota and DaveSuperPowers was that TI, and I never saw it this way, but it's pretty much your own reasoning for doing things. And that struck me interesting because as I was watching Megan's video, I was like, this is TI, and it didn't make sense to me, to be honest. But I wasn't saying like I wasn't jumping to conclusions saying like, oh, and this is immediately wrong. I was just like, I've never heard of it this way. I wonder if this is a face of TI that maybe I haven't explored yet. And then that's when also, I saw DaveSuperPowers video of TI, and I'm like, oh, interesting. I see. And so then I added that face to, the faces of TI that I'm trying to now build, like everything that composes of TI. And that is, according to what Meghan, she gave examples such as like a particular way of doing things, like a particular way of maybe like hanging her clothes, like what do I want to wear, stuff like that. And although I never really had that problem, and I think that's for a myriad of reasons, it was interesting to at least now know that, oh, this is an aspect of TI that I can now see in that manner. So some examples that I've really picked up on recently would be things like watching what I want without considering what others may want to watch. So my TI, usually my FE is like, if there's anybody around, including even Jamila, then it's like, okay, I may want to watch this show, this movie or whatever, but if Jamila's here, then we have to focus on what she may want to watch. And this sounds a little bit like FI, but it's like, I mean, as in like me, what I would want to watch, that sounds like a little bit like FI, but there's a distinction there, I guess. Because I'm an FE dominant, it's like, okay, I'm just always aware of like the people that's around me, and I want to do what will be the common denominator for everyone. Like, what does everybody want to do? My goal is pretty much like sacrificing, everybody sacrifices a little bit of what they want so that we could all have what we want. Because it's super hard to just always, like get to the individual's needs. So I guess there's that. But if it were up to me, then, days like today where Jamila is at work and like I have the whole house to myself and everything, I get to do whatever I want. And that especially includes the things that she may not be as interested in, to like the shows that she may not be as interested in watching. or me editing videos, me recording videos, and not having to worry that I'm neglecting her, something like that. I can just do whatever I want to do, and not worry about having to meet other people's needs, or if I'm neglecting another person. And getting away from societal expectations. So Megan was talking about, like, from my understanding, it seemed like she said that she was learning to pick out the clothes that she wants to wear without thinking, okay, what does society want me to wear, something like that. And once again, like, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but me, I hadn't really ever had that struggle, but I see how that could be an aspect of TI, because it's like it's separating yourself from what the social norm may be, to do what you internally want to do, and what makes sense to you. So staying true to your truth, that's another thing. So one thing that also made me one thing that was a mind blower for me with TI was how Antonia Dodge, who's an ENTP who's worked vigorously on her TI, she said that TIFE, the way that I understood it from listening to the ENTP Personality Hacker podcast, advice podcast, which is another way that I was developing my TI, by listening to a whole bunch of advice for ETPs, who the TI is their growth spot. I started practicing some of the things that was being told to them. So, like, right now, like I said, I'm trying to practice radical honesty, but I still want to also practice tact. I value tact, and I feel like, maybe some people be like, well, you can't have radical honesty without tact. Well, I think that I'm finding a way to get there. So just wait on it. But with Antonia, she said that staying true to her truth was what it was. So when she had left her religious, she came to a decision where now it's like, okay, I don't really believe in what this group, even my own family, believes in anymore. But F.E. Tuggle, if I tell them that I don't believe in this anymore, I'm going to be ostracized from the community, Do I hold true to my TI truth of what I believe and what makes sense to me, and sacrifice my community for that? Or do I just sacrifice my TI truth and what I believe to stay integrated in this community that I don't even really believe in what they're believing in anymore? And that was like, whoa. Because once again, that sounds a little bit like FI. Like, do I stay true to myself? TI is pretty much staying true to yourself, but true to your truth. Not like, oh, this is who I am, as how FI would be, but like, this is what I think. This is what makes sense to me. And if all of you guys are thinking this way, but I don't really think that, I don't really believe this, do I just keep these thoughts to myself and, stay with you? And sometimes that's necessary. That it's more common. It's authentic for certain types to do this, because that's what it would be actually inauthentic for them to do what Antonia did. However, there's still a way to integrate it. So one thing that I've recently been called by a few people is opinionated. And I realized that I never knew how opinionated I was, and that's not a word that I would have actually referred to myself as, at least if I was describing myself. But I'm not offended by it. In fact, I'm like, oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, I am opinionated. Like, my whole channel is full of me expressing my opinions. But I understand that my opinions are opinions. This is what makes sense to me. I'm not a closed-minded person where it's like, oh, this is just the facts, and nobody can argue them with me. Instead, it's like, hey, this is what I think. But if somebody has an opposing opinion, then I'm so happy to explore that with that person. I want to better understand where they're coming from. I ask a lot of questions. I try to make sure that before I ever say that somebody is wrong, I want to make sure that I understand every single aspect, or as much as I can, of their perspective, which leads in NI as well. I want to understand as much as they possibly do, so that I can be like, okay, now that I'm fully seeing things from your eyes and I'm seeing how it makes sense and everything, I think I'm in the best position to point out the holes that I personally see. And then you can tell me, oh, well, actually, that's not a hole. You're just seeing this wrong. Or I could actually now be helping you to patch that hole. And that's my way of seeing us come to a truth. Because with me, FE and TI, they work together. They still want to be on the same page. You know, FETI is pretty much asking, what should we be thinking? Okay, yeah, so just double checked. FETI is asking, what should we all be thinking? And then FITE, which we're not talking about in this video, but you know, is asking, what should we all be doing? And so, when it comes to FETI, it wants to be on the same page with the information that it receives. It wants accuracy, and that's where FE and TI, you know, they marry each other, because FE wants harmony. FE wants everybody to be on the same page with their values. TI wants everybody to be on the same page with their information, because if I think that this is the answer, but then you think that this is the answer, well, let's FE this now. And, you know, because FE is now like going around and saying like, hey, what did you get? What did you get? What did you get? And like checking with the external world to see if this has been TI consistent. Is this really like what everybody's been getting? So for me, I try to make sure that my information is clean sliced in that way by like having my own stuff. You know, like if I have opinions, theories, whatever, then I go and check them with other people, and I vet them through a very vigorous process. So that's some of my things with that. Yeah, and then so just referring back to like what I just brought up with Aunt Antonia, I've been learning to also stay true to my own truth. If I believe something very heavily, if I have an opinion on something, now I don't just share it with anyone, if we're being honest. I am elusive with my TI truths and stuff like that, because, not that I'm afraid that I'm going to ruffle feathers or anything, but I just feel like I share the ones that I think that are necessary, and the other ones, I think I just share them with like those who I'm close to, or those who I believe will actually value it and will actually like to listen deeply. So a lot of them are shared on this channel, you know, those of you who actually watch these long videos and everything, and especially those who actually like communicate with me, especially in my coaching sessions and stuff. I give a lot of TI internal stuff, internal opinions of mine that I don't share on Twitter or on in my YouTube videos and stuff like that. That's a better way of like getting to know me. But I stick to my truths, and I just learned that, you know, it's kind of like the Twitter effect. Like, the more that you vocalize your truth, and the Twitter effect is a video that I made for those of you who don't know. If you want, you can go figure it out. But the more that you vocalize your truths, the more that you vocalize what your opinions are, while still being open to other people's opinions, you're pushing out those in the room who are listening to you like, I don't really like what he's saying, you know, I'm leaving. But then you're also drawing in people who are walking through the hallway and are like, oh wow, that sounds good. I hadn't thought about it that way. And they're walking in, and now you're gathering more of your own tribe, FE. So you see how these two are like working together. And I think that's why that's one of the ways where I've really been seeing myself develop my own TI. And lastly, observing why I do things, like what works for me. So with Jamila, she questions just about everything that I do. Jamila loves to ask things like, oh, well, why do you use 2 different sponges for this and that? Oh, why do you do this? Why do you do that? You know, stuff like that. And because I just follow things, because my TI is inferior, then it's there, but it's not really, it's like in the background running, so I don't always think through every single reason why I'm doing something, because it's just autopilot, you know. However, when Jamila forces me to force my attention on it, it's like, why do I make the bed in this way? Why do I brush my teeth in this way? Stuff like that. Like one time I was just brushing my teeth, and she was watching me, and she was like, you do everything differently than I do. You use hot water, I use cold water. You put on a whole, you put on like a small pea-sized piece of toothpaste. I put on like a whole bunch to cover the whole thing, and stuff like that. And then I was like, huh, why do I do all that? And then later on, I was able to give her my reasoning, like, oh, I mean, this has happened so many times. Like, okay, so I thought about it. The reason why I do this, and it was all subconscious, so I had to use my NI in order to go there, is because I read somewhere that you're only supposed to use a little bit of toothpaste on your toothbrush anyway. Like a pea-sized amount will do enough. And if anything, the bubbles don't really help anything. Your teeth are still getting clean. They just put the bubbles there for special effects and all of that. But you really just need the pea-sized amount. And you can get more of those bubbles if you rinse your mouth before you start brushing your teeth, as opposed to wetting the toothbrush with the toothpaste, where you're now washing off all of the important stuff, and then you start brushing your teeth with that. So there's my reasoning for that. The reason why I use hot water is because I rinse my mouth before I brush my teeth and everything. I don't want to like use my cold water for that, because cold water would damage the nerves of your teeth or whatever it is. Also, the reason why I have two different sponges is because one is for the glass. It's better that you have a sponge that smells like fruit juice and water or whatever it is, than to have the same sponge that smells like chicken grease, and then you're using that to like wash glasses and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, that's just one example. I have a particular way of doing everything, and it was all like co-pilot. It was all autopilot until she forced me to start thinking about why I do things in these certain ways. So that's another way of how I thought that TI has been manifesting in me and developing in me. And once again, I'm just no longer afraid of sharing certain truths. And I guess that'll be a video for another day when she's here. She's actually better at explaining this, but she's just been telling me that I've been growing over the years more, not opinionated. I am more opinionated, she says, but like I seem to be more challenging of other people's thoughts and other people's opinions on stuff, and like very confident in what I believe in things, while still being open to them and holding my own ground. And this is what she said. I'm not bragging on myself, but it's like, oh wow, that's very interesting. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly blah on some of my own thought processes on how I've developed my own TI, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Let me know what you guys think on all of this, and if you disagree with certain things, let me know. If you want me to explain a little bit more on certain things, then also let me know. And final thing that I remembered, I most articulate my TI thoughts when I am using a metaphor. And I believe this makes sense because my auxiliary being NI, once again, this is why I focus so heavily on my auxiliary function, is because focusing solely on TI is like that's my inferior function. It's not supposed to be as strong as my dominant and my auxiliary function, but my auxiliary can be the gateway, the access to get there. So one thing that I've realized is that I'm not really that good at speaking about things in very binary code, ones and twos, or and just very systematically, very logically coherent, consistent when it comes to just data, stuff like that. I'm not good at that, and I admit that, and I'm okay with that. But the times when I most make the best sense, the times when it's consistently, logically consistent and all of that, is when I actually present a metaphor, when I present an analogy, when I present a parable of some sort to portray or depict the message that I'm trying to actually convey. When I do that, when I paint the image in that manner, that's when all of a sudden my TI is honed into, because it's being channeled through a much stronger process. So if you are an ENFJ, then this will be your process and how you do that. And if you're an ESFJ, then hone into your SI And I'm actually going to be having an ESFJ interview video where I talk about this on a much deeper level with the perfect choice for an ESFJ interview video that I'm going to be doing very soon, hopefully by next month. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be explaining more on how to tap into your TI, specifically as an ESFJ. But yeah, if you're an ENFJ, since I already did the ENFJ interview video and everything, I probably didn't really go as deep into this as much in that video. Just take it from here that you're probably best off. Like for ENFJs, it's natural to just be like, okay, it's not that they're thinking of a metaphor, but it's that they're thinking of a way to portray the idea or the concept that's in their head. And then the first thing that comes to mind is to liken it to something else that'll more easily portray it. And you see this all the time in my other videos. That's when you get the analogies and the parables and all of these other things with a whole bunch of NI symbols in that to depict whatever they're trying to say, because they're not able to say it in a very clean, raw, concrete manner. As opposed to ESFJs who, it's not that ESFJs never use metaphor, but once again, we'll get into that later. But yeah, so that's my final notes. Let me know what y'all think about this video and everything, and done.